What's up, notJust developers? I hope you're doing great. Today is December 1st, and I hope that you can already feel the Christmas mood around the corner. And with that being said, allow me to introduce you DEVember. DEVember is a month-long marathon of React Native tutorials where we will go live. The idea is pretty simple. We're gonna go live with a React Native and Expo project during the whole December, every single day at 12 p.m. GMT. So today is day one, and the topic of today's video is getting started with React Native and Expo. Today we're gonna learn about how you can set up your development environment, how you can create a new project, how you can connect it with GitHub, and and we will also focus on actually building the core of the application that we're gonna use throughout the whole challenge. Later in today's video, we're also gonna install Expo Router. We're gonna see how we can configure it, how we can navigate from one screen to another. But before that, before we actually start working, let me quickly tell you a little bit more about DEVember and what to expect during the next 24 days. Is it gonna be free? Yes, this is a free marathon. It's going to be hosted here on YouTube. So if you're interested, make sure to subscribe to the channel not to miss any video. Again, this is going to be daily videos, and we're going to go live at 12 p.m. GMT, and you will also be able to watch them later. So if you're watching it a couple of months in advance, I hope you will find this valuable as well, because the whole idea is to focus on covering specific topics every single day, specific features, ideas that you might be interested in building and implementing in your mobile application in React Native and Expo. So for this, I need your help. If you have ideas, we have created a board on GitHub where you can submit your ideas and where you can vote for other ideas that you want to see me build during this series. So all the links you'll find in the description below. The link to GitHub is actually here. And go ahead and look through some ideas, vote for the ones that you enjoy. And also, if you want me to build something specific, make sure to drop a screenshot there, explain the idea, and I'll be happy to take a look and maybe include it in one of the future videos. But the idea is that DEVember is not just about learning, not just, very good. DEVember is also about giving back, because during this event, our team decided to support and to create a fundraiser. The fundraiser, we called it Education for Children, and with this fundraiser, we are joining forces. We are helping the Save the Kids organization with their effort in providing education to every child in the world. We believe that every kid deserves the opportunity to learn, and with your help, I think we can have a very big impact on helping them have this opportunity. So the fundraiser, we set it up directly on YouTube in order for everyone to be able to participate who wants. And throughout this month, near every live stream, you will see this kind of pop-up where you'll be able to donate. The donations are going directly to the Save the Children nonprofit organization, and all 100% of the proceeds that you're gonna donate will go to the Save the Children organization. Not even YouTube is taking any cut, so all your support will matter during this month. We also set up some incentives to say, as a thank you for your help in raising funds for this this cause. So here are some of the details about the incentives that you're gonna get if you donate, and make sure to send to our email the receipt that you're gonna get, because from my end I do not see specific names of the donations. And more details about this you can find on our website, notJust.dev/events/DEVember. And if you cannot donate and you still want to help we decided to donate $100 for every 1,000 new subscribers that we're gonna get during December. So by simply subscribing to the channel, you're going to help this cause. All right, that was most of the important parts about DEVember. I'm going to provide more details later in the video where I'm gonna answer your questions, guys. But I think we can already get started. Hello, everyone who is joining us live. How are you doing, guys? Are you excited about DEVember? And by the way, make sure to share on social media and use the hashtag DEVember and share the projects that you're gonna build, the learnings that you're gonna get. And I would really like to see that out there and to see more people joining the event. Naveen, thank you very much. Aniket, hello. How are you doing, guys? Let's see if the donations, if the fundraiser is actually enabled. So this is the first time we organize this, so we're still learning. Anyway, so let's get into the tutorial. And today the goal is going to be to get started, to set up an Expo project. And throughout this process, I also will share with you some of the tips and tricks that you will need to get started with React Native. Oh, Brijen, hello, how are you doing? Brijen is the winner of notJust hack. No, it's not enabled. That's kind of sad. You do not see it on the page. Let me actually also check. Let me check that to make sure that everything is working, and then we can get started with our tutorial. Not sure if it's available in every country, but for me it's actually visible. So if I go to the YouTube, to the live stream, I see here donate now. And yeah, with more details. Camera up. Yes, I see already people voting for ideas, so now we're on our board of ideas. Perfect. Don't feel shy, also submit your ideas. As you can see here, I have some ideas of how you can submit ideas. Just provide some information about it, provide some screenshots as a reference, and the interesting ideas that will get the most votes, we're gonna pick for the next live streams. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Whenever I work with React Native applications nowadays, in 99% of the cases, when I start a new project, I start with Expo. There is maybe still a misconceptions out there of what's possible with Expo and what's not. And I just want to say that Expo nowadays is in a completely different situation compared to how it was a couple of years ago. If a couple of years ago there were some limitations if you were building applications with Expo, nowadays with the config plugins, anything is possible, so you can have native code in your Expo application. So all the limitations are gone, but the benefits that we get by using Expo in our development workflow are still there. So the benefits are a much better development experience, a much easier way to get started in terms of what you have to install and configure on your environment, the possibility to right away use Expo Go on your device. Even if you, for example, don't have a Mac OS, with Expo Go on a device, you can still build and test for iOS. So yes, the development experience is much better, and that's why in this series we're gonna use Expo. To get started with Expo, let me also go to the documentation. In terms of environment, to get started with Expo, the environment that you need to have set up on your machine is really small. Like, you don't have to have a lot of tools. One of the most important parts is you need notJS, and notJS you can install by going to their notJust.org and downloading it from here. It's available on all systems, and then you can install. And after you do that, you will have access to, here is a terminal. Let me maybe move here. So after you install Node.js, you'll have access to Node. You will have access to NPM, which is a package manager that will allow us to install different libraries. And we will also have access to npx, which is similar to NPM, that allows us to simply run and execute on the fly some packages. In fact, we're going to use npx to configure and start and create a new Expo project. Anyway, besides Node.js, we will also need Git, and I will show you in a moment how we can use Git, how we can connect the Git repository to GitHub to host it there. So yeah, make sure to follow this documentation as well and install Git on your system. After you install it, you will have access to the Git CLI command line tool. Anonymous donation, thank you very much. Let's get it started, guys. I'm so excited. Anyway, and yes, that's everything that we need as a must requirement at this moment. Let's go ahead and start by initializing an Expo project. And as we go, I will also tell you like some additional tools that you might need. Let me go to the projects, YouTube, and here let's make a directory DEVember. DEVember. Let's navigate to a folder where we keep our projects. I created there a new folder, and when we are here, the next step is going to be to initialize a new project with Expo. To do that, we're gonna use npx and a tool called create expo app. That's everything that we need, but I usually like to put at latest in order to take the latest version of this create expo app package, and yeah, in order to have a latest version of it. Because if I use it before without latest, npx will take it from cache and it will not install it from the npm registry. The next part is the name of a project. So the name of a project will be, for example, DEVember. I will do DEVember test because I already have this one. So I will just show you how we can do it. And the last argument is a -t in order to select a template from which we want to start. By default, Expo is providing us 4 templates. The first one is a blank. It's a very minimal and simple empty canvas of an application. The second one is the same blank, but with TypeScript configured. Then we have navigation, which has Expo Router already configured and a couple of screens there set up. And the blank bear, which does not use which has the natives code as well. I would like to go with a file base because it already has some screens and things set up, but in fact I'm gonna go with a blank TypeScript, and I will show you exactly how we can install Expo Router, configure it in any kind of project. So this is going to be much easier for us to understand all the moving pieces that we have in the application. So scroll down until you get to the blank TypeScript, press enter, and now we're gonna have to wait around 3 minutes for Expo to download all the dependencies, set up our project, and then we're going to be able to start working on it. To start working on the project, we're going to need some kind of code editor. Of course, you can use any code editor pre-installed on your computer, but my preference is VS Code. So throughout this series, I'm going to use VS Code. If you're using something else, it's gonna perfectly work. So it doesn't really matter what code editor you are using. All right, we see that the project has been, the project is ready. So our work with the terminal is finished. Now we need to simply open this project in our editor. For that, I will open Visual Studio Code, or actually I'm gonna do code DEVember test, and this will open the folder DEVember test in Visual Studio Code. If you don't have that shortcut, simply open Visual Studio Code and go ahead from File, Open Folder, and find the folder that you just initialized. Now that we have our project here, the first step I like to do is to actually run the template and see what do we have to work with. So let's open a terminal. You can do that from the top, New Terminal, or using the shortcut. And from here, simply run npm start. npm start to see what actually is happening when we execute npm start. We can look at in the package.json. Under the scripts, there is the start command that simply executes expo start. Now, after we execute this, we see that, expo start is being executed and the macro bundler is started. From here, we can interact with our application. We can run it on different targets. We can see and debug the application logs here as well. So this is going to be the place where we will interact with the development server. The easiest way to see the application on your device and to start testing it is by downloading Expo Go application on Android and iOS on your physical device. It's available on both markets, and simply download it, then scan the QR code that you see here with Expo Go, and you'll see the application running directly on your phone. That's the easiest way because it doesn't you don't have to set up or configure anything extra on your computer. I'm not gonna show because it's quite straightforward. You download, sign in with your account, you scan this QR code, and it will automatically run on your physical device. If you want, however, to test it locally on your machine, you will need either Android emulator or iOS simulator. To run it on Android emulator, we have this opportunity both on Windows, Linux, and macOS. However, for iOS simulator, we actually need a macOS system in order to have an iOS simulator. To install and to have iOS simulator, we need to install Xcode, which you can find on App Store. Simply go to App Store, look for Xcode. Xcode like this, download and install it, and then you will have access to the iPhone emulator. I'm gonna do it like this, and after you have it open, we can press on I, and this will open the application on the emulator itself. I have some errors, but probably that the emulator is not ready yet. Let's try again. Yes, it was not unlocked. So now we will wait and our application will run here on this iOS simulator. We see the text open up .tsx to start working on your application. That means that everything is working, our React Native project is running, and we can already start working at it. When it comes to Android, what you have to do is you have to install some Android tools. I would like to point you to the React Native docs. And also we have a video on our channel explaining and showing how you can set up Android Studio and so on. So in the React Native docs, in the environment setup, we go to the setup environment. We select React Native CLI, for example, macOS or Windows, and then Android. And here it will show you what you have to install to be able to run and to have like an Android SDKs, the platform, and the AVD, the virtual devices. These are the simulators. But again, this is extra, like you don't have to do it. If you have Expo Go and it's working, I think that's perfectly fine. And you'll need this only when you get into in more depth. Anyway, this is our project. It's running, and again, let's go ahead and open this app.tsx file that is recommended here in our application to see what do we have there. In this file, we have a simple functional component, and this is the entry point of our application. This is where everything starts at this moment. A bit later, we're gonna change how things work. We see here a text box with some text, and if we change it in our code and save it, it automatically refreshes on the device, no matter where you are running it, in Expo Go, in Simulator, and so on. That means that the hot reloading is also working, so we are definitely ready to get started. A little word about the debugging. Whenever something happens, usually the best debugging tool is, of course, console log. So if I'm gonna do here a console log hello, where do you think we're gonna see this console log? We're gonna see that in the terminal where we are running the development server, the Metro bundler. If you scroll down until the end, we see a log with hello here. So yeah, you can also press C to clear everything and to get back to the menu. And you can press R here to reload the application. And when we reload the application, our console log is executed and we see it here. There is also a console warn, which is a warning, and we will see it here in the terminal. And we will also should see it as a orange warning here in our application. These are simple, like everything with orange, these are simple warnings, and in production they will not be visible. Everything that is with red, for example, if we do console error, or if we actually throw an error, we're gonna see it with red, and that means that something is bad and we should debug and see what's going on. Anyway, that is going to be useful for us whenever something is not going to go the way we want it, and we will need to debug and see what's going on behind the scenes. So we have our application, we are ready to get started, but a good rule of thumb is to keep track of all your changes in the project using Git. What's Git? Well, Git is a system to I was not expecting me to blank at what's Git. It's a system for us to keep track of changes of source code. So what it helps us to do is, for example, if I do here in the terminal git status, it will tell us that, hey, you have one file that you have changed, and this is the app.tsx. You can also do git diff, and that will actually show you here what's the change that you have made. So with minus, with red, we see what we deleted, and with plus, we see what we added. In order to commit these changes to your Git, and committing is basically creating a checkpoint in time to which you can revert back later, and they are also very good for us to see how the project evolves and to see where, for example, a bug was introduced, in what commit. So after you finish a feature, the first step to do is, of course, check with git status what's going on here. After that, if we are happy with the files that we want to include in this commit, we can do git add, and here we will specify the files that we want to add. In most cases, like in 99% of the cases, that's going to be git add dot, and this means git add everything from this directory. And if I do git status now, status, we're gonna see already with a green line modified, which means that this modification is not yet committed, but it is staged. It is added to be committed with the next commit. To create an actual commit, that's what we're gonna do. Git commit -m for the message, and here we provide a message that represents the change. For example, change to hello world. Now, if I do git status, we will see that git status, it will tell us nothing to commit, working tree clean. So now we have this point in time reference of the changes that we have made. But so far, the repository, the Git repository, is only local on our system. It's on our machine. It's basically a directory here in our folder. So if something happens, if something bad happens with our machine, if we lose access to it, if someone steals it, if we lose our laptop with our project, that means that we completely lose the whole source code that we have been working on. For that reason, there are platforms where we can store or host our Git repositories. So if Git is the system that actually is doing the heavy lifting of managing the differences and creating all of these commits, GitHub, on the other hand, is the platform where we store, where we host our repositories. To create a GitHub repository, create an account, then go ahead and create a new repository. Choose the account that you want to store it on, give it a name, for example, DEVember. I will do DEVember test because I already have DEVember and I'm going to show you that in a moment. Give it a description and you can make it either public or private. And that's it. That's everything you need to do. Press create repository and GitHub in the next screen will have a quick setup guide. There are two parts. For example, if we do not have yet a Git repository, we're going to have to run git init. We didn't have to do that because the template of Expo already had Git initialized and we only have to continue committing changes. So we're going to use the second part of a GitHub here to push an existing repository from the command line. Let's copy the first command, and the first command is simply connecting our local repository with the remote one from GitHub. Now, we actually don't need this one because by default the main branch is called main, and we can go right away to the last one, git push -u origin main. If we execute this command, we're gonna see that something is happening here, and if we go back to our GitHub and refresh the page, we already see the files from our project. If we look here at the commits, we're going to see the initial commit that is coming with a template and the second one that I created. So we can go ahead, look at it and see exactly what changes were made during this commit. So this is going to be important for you during this challenge if you will want to see the changes of every single day that we're going to do throughout the tutorial. The next time you do some changes, for example, if you add one more text here, let's do #DEVember. After you create a feature, after you fix a bug, after you do something, and you test the application and make sure that, okay, I'm ready to commit this change, go ahead, open the terminal, and start with git status. You see the files that were modified. If you need to look at the differences, you can also go through git diff. It depends like how much changes did you make. And after you're happy with the changes, go ahead and do git add to add all the files from current directory to the staging area, and after that git commit with a message DEVember. Here it committed, but that means that it committed to the local repository. So at this moment, these changes are only locally on our computer, because if I go back to our repository and refresh it, there is still 2 commits, and the last one is 15 minutes ago, or 4 minutes ago, let's say. To push the changes from locally to GitHub, all we have to do is do git push, and that should automatically push to the current branch, the current local branch, to the remote branch. So now if I go back to GitHub and refresh, I'm gonna see 3 commits, and we see that the last change to app.tsx was now, and you can also again check what exactly was changed here. So that was a very short introduction on how you can use Git. Most probably a lot of you already are using it throughout your day-to-day job, but for people who are just getting started, I think this is an important part that in most tutorials is skipped, and I hope you enjoyed that. Now I want to show you how you can clone an existing repository, because I already have set up the repository for this project. So for DEVember, I'm gonna find it here, notJust.dev DEVember, and here is the initial project where we also have the discussion with ideas. Let's see if we have new ideas here. Yes, we see calendar integration. Nice. Mobile app for Shopify store. Shopify has a GraphQL API. Okay, that might be something interesting. Tracking item. Nice. All right. Also, don't be shy to submit also Q&A. And I will try to answer your questions during our live streams. Okay, so far we learned how to set up and create an Expo project and how we can connect it with GitHub to keep track of our changes. Now I'm going to show you how you can clone an existing repository and how you can start working at the DEVember. I'm going to have a very structured way where we will have a separate branch for every single day, and you will be able to have starting files so that everyone starts from the same point. And that's why here is some short instruction on how we can do that. Whenever there is a project on GitHub, for example, that we want to try it out, we can do, if it's public, we can do that by going to the GitHub repository, and from here, from code, we can copy the clone URL here. Let me copy the URL. Let's go back. I'm actually going to close this Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to be back in the terminal. In the terminal, we have here, I will do clear. And if I do ls, we have a DEVember test that we just created. Now, my goal is to clone the DEVember project, and that's going to be the same for you. Clone it, and we will start working together at it. To do that, again, go to the repository, press on the green button code. Let's copy the clone command or URL. Let's go back to the terminal, and the command to clone a Git repository is quite straightforward. It's git clone, and then we provide the URL of the repository that we want to clone. Let's press enter, and what is happening here, Git will download all the files from the main branch from this repository. Now, if I do ls here, we're gonna see 2 projects, DEVember test and DEVember that we just cloned. Let's go ahead and open DEVember in Visual Studio Code. And this is exactly the same starter project application as we saw before. But there are some things missing. For example, we see that it cannot find some of these modules. That's because now, as we can see, we do not have a node modules folder. This folder is ignored because we don't want to store all the external dependencies in our Git repository. We only store their references in package.json. So in package.json under dependencies, here we specify the packages that we depend on and their versions. Now, if you do npm install, npm will look in the package.json and will go ahead and download all the dependencies that we need. It will store them in node modules. So now we have everything that our project and that depends on. After this is finished, we can open back up the .tsx. Everything is looking fine here. I'm not sure what's happening here. Maybe. Yeah, everything is looking fine here. So we can go ahead and start the development server. For that, open the terminal and let's run npm start. From here, we already know the deal. I'm gonna run it on iOS emulator by pressing I. You can simply scan the QR code or run on Android as well if you're working on a Windows or on a Linux machine. And here is our application, the starter point, the similar as we saw previously. We're gonna continue working using this application, using this repository, and you will find the link to this repository on the actual page or in the description of this video. So all the links will be there in the description. All right, so that was the getting started part. I hope we are ready to actually start working on some exciting features. Because the next step is going to be to create the core of our application. And what do I mean by the core of our application is that my idea is to have the initial page to be an advent calendar, and an advent calendar looks something like this. This is my inspiration, something with 24 cells or boxes, and every single box is going to be a separate folder or a separate page or group of pages in our application. And during every day, we're gonna work in the same application, but at the same time, we're gonna try to have everything separate into a folder and into a bucket. So the goal for today is to actually create this advent calendar using some lists. We're gonna learn how we can render text, how we can work with built-in components like views, how we can style them. And also we're gonna set up Expo Router for the navigation. We're gonna see how we can navigate from a screen to another. So it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. But before I do that, let's see what people in the live chat are doing. How are you doing, guys? Are you excited about this? Have you started? Will you follow along? That's what I'm curious about. How funny, I just built a calendar myself. Simon, that's nice. This is not actually going to be a calendar. It's going to be very simple, like 24 boxes. But yeah, as we move on, maybe we can improve the design. Maybe we can add some animations. Who knows? Right code. I have 2 apps in stores that are using Expo. Super easy to update. Yes, updating is another benefit of using Expo, because updating an Expo application is much easier than updating a React Native CLI application. Because what's the difference? The difference is with React Native CLI, we as developers are responsible also for the native side code, for the Android native side code and for the iOS native side code. Whenever you install and set up some libraries, usually if they have like native side code, you have to go to your native side project and change some configurations. Now, whenever you have to update, you have to make sure to update all of these configurations as well. So when you go to the native side, like there, it's always a mess, because yes, we are most developers that are getting into React Native are probably coming from the web, and we don't want to mess with the native side part, with the Android Studio, with Xcode and so on. While when using Expo, we are only responsible for the JavaScript side of our project, and Expo is taking care of the native side projects. Now this thing with Expo plugins, we can have like some configuration files that will tell Expo how to set up the native sites. So with this in mind, like it's very, very easy to update. Currently, I'm learning React.js, and this is the perfect time to follow along with you. Perfect. We are focused on React Native, but things that you're going to learn here will help you understand better React.js as well. When I started with React Native, and only then I went to React.js and to the web. So that's also a very good part. And also, we will try to run our application on the web as well. With Expo Router, that's super easy. Let me see some other comments, and then we can continue our application. I'm using Expo for all new project, as its best feature is upgrade. I have 4-year-old React Native project with which whenever I need to update, it takes 2 years of my life. This is where Expo shines, really. Yes. Will there be explanation on how to set up EAS locally? What I recommend you to do is go ahead in the ideas, and let's create a new idea for EAS. Yeah, let's just do EAS. EAS. I think it's gonna be pretty clear. Fundamentals. Configure, build, submit, maybe pre-build. And if you're interested, make sure to come to these discussions and upvote it. Navin is saying that it's saying you cannot donate in this country or region. Navin, let me know where are you joining it from. I will have a look what's happening there, and we'll check what other possibilities we have in this situation. Are you covering things like Redux API for interacting with camera and other concepts important for mobile apps? That's the whole point of the DEVember marathon, is to cover these fundamentals and very important topics. But at the same time, I have like a real like the feeling of doing some nice project or interesting stuff, something with animations, something that we don't usually do, but it's going to be something interesting. So yes, I'm open to cover anything that you guys are interested in. So make sure to submit ideas on our idea board. Make sure to vote for the ones that you're interested in, and based on that, I'm gonna create the content schedule. But things like interacting with camera, this is most probably like it's gonna happen. So we're gonna do that. I also plan to do something with microphone and with audio recordings, with playback. And for that, we have here in the idea board the iOS voice memos. And this idea came to me from someone asking me how they can do the wave here. And building it is going to teach us how to work with microphones, how to work with audio playback, maybe how to store on the local device like files and data. Top. How to access the idea on GitHub. Let me do here discussions, and I will drop a link here. Travis Burnett donated $5 to the fundraiser. Thank you very much, Travis, for your donation. And for everyone who is just joining, let me repeat this once again. So DEVember is not just about learning. Yes, we're gonna go live every single day with a new React Native tutorial, but the whole goal behind this is to raise money for a very interesting cause. Where is it? Here. So we are raising money with a goal of education for children, and we have all the money that you're gonna donate will go to the Save a Kids organization, and this is organized through YouTube. So if you believe that, if you have a possibility to help, that would be very, very appreciated by us and by everyone else. So yeah, check it out. Somewhere on YouTube, you'll see this pop up with donate, and where you can show your support. And if you cannot donate, simply subscribing to the channel will help, because we decided to donate $100 for every 1,000 new subscribers that we're gonna get throughout December. Use React Native in my work every day. Love this idea. Thank you for content. Thank you very much, Travis. That's perfect. Okay, guys. So let's go back to our project. And as I said, we want to do something with Advent Calendar. Actually, beforehand, before the live stream, I was playing a bit with the Midjourney AI to get some inspiration for user interfaces. Let me find something that I generated. We will not use it like pixel perfect, but it's going to give us some ideas of how we can structure this. So let me see. Let me sign in quickly. And here are some of the pictures, some of the user interfaces that it generated. Where? Here. So initially it was something like this, very nice vibe of Christmas and so on, but not exactly what I wanted. Then I said like I need like some kind of a grid with some Christmas and coding elements. And to be honest, this is something that I like the most out of everything. Then I try something else. Damn, it looks really nice. Yeah, that really, really looks good. So yeah, something like this. Well, the idea is that we will definitely have some kind of boxes, a list of them, and with a number inside it. Let's go ahead and start building, and we're gonna see what looks better as we go. For that, I'm going to open up.tsx, and I'm gonna start working here, defining and creating the components, and later we're gonna extract them to their separate custom components. Let me go ahead and start by deleting the text from here, make some space, and that's where we will put things. The component that we're going to work with is, we're going to start with a view and a text. A view is a simple container that groups together elements. We can apply styles to views, and that will allow us to build these boxes with round corners. So let's start by rendering a view. To render a view, we have an opening tag, we have a closing tag, and inside here we can put other elements that will be visible on the screen, because a view itself is nothing visual. What we want to render inside the view is some kind of a text, for example, the number of the day number, for example, 1. And I already see 1 here. If I'm going to copy paste this one more time and change it to 2, just to see what's happening, we see it there. Now, let's style a bit these cards. To style, in React Native, we do not have CSS, we style everything with JavaScript objects, but the styling in JavaScript is inspired by the styling from CSS, so you're gonna see a lot of things that are similar to how they're called in CSS. Anyway, using the style sheet create, we create these objects, and in our rendering part, we assign the styles to different components. For example, if I will create here box container with a background color of red and a text with a color blue, nothing will change because we just defined the styles. We also need to assign them to some components. To assign it, there is a property called style, and most building components have this style component. And here we will access the styles.box for this one. We already see that the background there is red. And if we give to this text styles.text, I'm not sure if it's actually blue there, but maybe it's just too small. For example, we can increase the font size of this text to 50. And now we can indeed see that the text color is blue. I'm going to copy paste again because we need to assign these styles to the second box as well. And I will call it 2. And let's go ahead in our component here and actually start shaping things up. For example, the box itself probably will have some kind of width. Let's start with some 300 width by 300 height. Later we're gonna think about like how to properly position them. And let's also I want to add some spacing between these boxes. One way to do that is to add margin to the container itself. So for example, margin 10 will add 10 pixels margin to all sides of our boxes. But this is a bit harder to manage in specific situations. And another way, or a new way that was introduced in React Native, is to use the property gap, which was available in CSS for a very long time, but in React Native it was introduced this year. And if we provide the gap on the parent container, it will have this exactly 10 pixels gap between the items. And this will work both horizontally and vertically, and it's much better, especially when you are working with grids. Now for the background color here, let me actually open the laptop because I have some colors there. I'm not sure how good they are, but it's gonna be better than just having a red color there. So for the color itself, I think I have F9 EDE 3. Is it? F9 ED E3. Maybe. The text color is a darker brown. 9B4521. Okay, that's good. And the font size, I think it was even 70. In order to align the text in the center of a container, we're gonna use some flex properties. Because the text is inside this box view, let's go ahead and add some styles on the box that will specify how do we want to align the children elements inside the box. For example, if we do justify content, center, this will center horizontally, or in other words, it will center the items on the main axis. Now, if we add align items center, this will align them on the secondary axis, and in this case, it will align them vertically in the same line. That's good. For the box itself, I can also add a very light border width 1 and border color can be the same as the text color. And a border width of 1 is probably too much, and we can even add a 0.5, or the smallest border width can be accessed by using stylesheet.hairline width. This is the smallest border that we can have. It's very, very thin. To round the corners of our box, it's also something related to the border. It's border radius, and we can provide a value here. The larger the value, the more round the box will be. So a 20 will be like this, and if it's too much, like 150, is going to be a circle. I don't know, 20 might be okay for now. Nice. Okay. Navin is saying, let's help Vadim reach 100k subscribers by the end of this series. Let's help him in return, guys. Thank you very much, Navin. That's not the main purpose of the series, but it would be really great to see this happening by the end of the year. And yeah, it will mean a lot to the whole notJust.dev team. Anyway, back to our project. Yeah, what else? Well, in a moment, we're gonna also think about fonts. I will show you how we can use a custom font. But now let's still focus on a bit of how we render things. Because at the moment, as you can see, we are simply copy-pasting the view that is rendering the box over and over again. So if we will need 24 boxes, we're simply gonna have to do 24 views like this, copy-paste. Whenever you are copy-pasting things while programming, that's a sign to think about how you can refactor it, how you can reuse code, how you can have reusable pieces of code. So the first step to improve the duplicated code blocks here is to actually have an array of data and then map through it and create an array of elements on the screen. What do I mean by that? First of all, let's define this array of data. For example, const days equal 1, 2, and 3. Now, instead of copy pasting this view over and over again, what we can do is we can map through the days and for every single day to render it inside a component like this. How to do that? Well, that's a very common thing that you will encounter while building applications is mapping through arrays and rendering components on the screen on the UI for every single element in an array. To do that, first of all, we need to open a pair of curly brackets, and this gives us access to JavaScript variables. For example, now in these curly brackets, I can access the days array. What I'm going to do is I'm going to map through the days array, and for every day, I want to render something on the screen. What do I want to render? Well, one of these boxes. So if I have it like this and I will remove the rest from the bottom, I will see that we already have 3 boxes on the screen. If I change something in the array, that's going to change automatically on the screen. Well, the number here is the same for both of them because we hard-coded it. Usually, we take the data about the actual item that we are rendering, and to access it again, in this text, instead of 1, we will open curly brackets to get access to JavaScript variables, and then we're going to use the day here that represents 1 item from this days array. And now we see that the first one is 1, then 2. If I change here to 6, it's going to reflect on the user interface automatically. Yes, again, this is very good for lists that are not too long. For example, when you know how many items you will have at maximum on the screen. For example, in this situation, this is perfectly fine because we always know that there will be 24 items on the screen. There is a better way, and I'm going to show you in a moment, but while we are still on this days.map, you might and you will see one warning, and the warning says each child in a list should have a unique key property. What does that mean? That means that whenever we are rendering lists using a .map or .forEach or something like that, every item that we are rendering on the screen, it should have a unique key here. For the value of a key, we can use the day, because the day is going to be unique. Well, if you have duplicated days here, you're still going to see the same error. So make sure you have a unique value there. This is purely for React to better optimize how it re-renders components. So it's not, if you don't have a key, it's not going to break your application, but if you have it, it's going to improve the performance of it. So always when you map, make sure to have a key on the first component that is being rendered. Perfect. Now, what I want to say is, I started this a little bit earlier, but the .map is a very good solution when we have limited amount of items, but the .map is quite limited because a lot of things we have to do ourselves. For example, managing the key we have to do ourselves. If we have a lot of items here, the container is not going to be scrollable, so we need to manually make it scrollable, and other things like improvements and so on. For that reason, when we have to work with larger lists that maybe have an unlimited amount of items, for example, a Facebook feed, a social media feed, or a list of items that you load from the server, in that case, we can use a component called FlatList from React Native. I will leave this map here. We will delete it in a moment, but now let me show you how we can render a FlatList. So, a FlatList, we will render it the same way as we rendered the other components here, but it's going to be a self-closing tag. We are not going to close it separately as a different tag. We're going to close it in the same opening tag here because we don't need anything inside. A FlatList is being managed through properties, and it requires 2 properties to get started. The first one is data, which should be the array of things that we want to display, to work with. And if we compare it with a map, the array of data is these days, because we want to render the days on the screen. The second property is called render item. The data provides information or data, and render item is a function that should specify how one item from this array should be rendered on the screen. Well, if we look at the dot map, we have similar logic. Like we have data, and here we specify how do we want to render one item from that array. So back to render item, this should be a function that returns some JSX, something to render on the screen. We can take this view, because that's what we want to render. We're not gonna need the key anymore. And initially for the day, we can say 1 here. I will comment out the days.map, not to mess with everything that we are doing. And we already see 1, 1, 1 on the screen. The good part is that we can also scroll this array, this list of items. Perfect. Now, how do we dynamically get the data that we are currently rendering? That data is going to be passed through here inside an object with a name item. So that's why we have to destructure. We have to destructure from that object the property called item. And the item is going to be one of these values from the array. We can use it to render it inside the text component as item. And just like that, the values are filled in correctly. And now we can have a very long array here of items. And as you can see, like with FlatList, it's much easier because it automatically manages the scroll view. It automatically manages the key if your items have IDs. And it also is very, very configurable. For example, you can have a horizontal list by simply passing here horizontal. And now we will be able to scroll horizontally. We can also use a FlatList to have infinite scrolling lists, where whenever we reach the bottom of the list, we do a fetch to get more data to load it below. This is very useful for feeds, for example, where you progressively load more data as you scroll through the list. Now I'm going to delete the map. We're not going to need it anymore. And we're also going to fix some of the stuff that we have here. The first thing is that the FlatList itself doesn't take the whole width of a container. That's because this container has the align item center and justify content center, which messes around with the positioning of a FlatList. So let's simply remove this. And now the items will start from the beginning. That's okay. But the scroll indicator is going to be to the right, which tells us that the FlatList is full width. Well, we lost the gap between items, but why? Because the container still has this gap. Well, we lost it because now the parent of our boxes is no longer the container, but something inside FlatList. The good thing is that we can style that container by sending to the FlatList here content container style. So we can say here styles.content, and if I provide here content, I usually like to start with a background color red just to see what's happening. If I see what I expect to see, that means that everything is good. And what I wanted to do here is I wanted to move a gap from the container to the content that wraps around our items. Perfect. Now the gap between items is back. and we can move on. What I want to do is actually I want to have multi-column lists. I want at least 2 columns on a mobile device. Maybe on the web we will need more columns. With FlatList we can simply change the number of columns using the num_columns property, and I will say 2. It will give you an error because we cannot change it on the fly, and we simply have to refresh the application by double pressing R on your keyboard. RR will refresh. We see that it indeed created 2 columns, and if I reduce a little bit the width and the height, we will see the 2 columns that we needed. I can do here also a 6. But how do we make sure that our items, they take the full space, the full available space? Well, we can do that by, instead of sending the width, maybe we can say that by sending a flex1, I expect the box to try to take maximum amount of space, but at the same time share it between the siblings. So on the same row we have 2 items, both of them have a flex1, which means that both of them will take half of available space. And this way we have, on the same row, we have them correctly. For the height, in order to have them back as squared, we will not be able to set a height that will match this width, because the width is dynamic and will change with the size of a screen. However, we can set an aspect ratio to a view, and if it's 1, that's going to be a square. If it's 1/2, that's going to be a vertical part. So with aspect ratio, you can calculate the other. So if you have width and aspect ratio, the height will automatically be calculated, and vice versa. If you have height and aspect ratio, the width will be calculated. Now, why did we lose again spaces between items in the same row? Because between the rows we have a gap of 10, but between the items in the row there is no gap. Well, because every row is encapsulated in another view. The good thing is that we can we can style that view as well using the something with style. Let's see, column wrapper style. This is going to be the styles that will be sent to a view that wraps our columns. So if I do column here and I go to our styles and give a gap 10, that will add the gap between the items here. Now, if we want some spacing around our items, I think we can do that by adding some padding to the content. If I add padding to the content 10, that will add padding to the left and the right, top and bottom of the whole container or content of a FlatList. Okay, and I think that's perfect. That's our list. What I will do now is let's add all the 24 days here. We can manually do that, or we can generate an array from using some array methods. So for example, generate or create an array of n elements. No. Okay, so for the days, we're gonna start with creating an array of size 24, and we're going to destructure it inside an array. And now we're gonna have actually 24 slots, but all of them, if I do console log days, we're gonna see that all the values are undefined. So we need to fill this array with some values. We need to fill them from 1 to 24. To do that, I'm going to map through this array, and this is the value that we're gonna receive. But as the second parameter of this map, we can get the index. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the index and use it as the value. So it will start from 0 all the way to 23. And actually, I'm going to do index plus 1 in order to go from 1 to 24. And just like that, we created an array of size 24 where the values is from 1 to 24. What else? What else do we need to do? The problem that our items are going behind this notch, we're gonna solve that a bit later. Now that we have this flat list, I want to show you how we can extract things to custom components. And why do we need that? Again, this goes back to when I said that whenever you copy paste pieces of code, think about how we can improve that by creating reusable components, reusable code blocks, reusable functions. So a reusable thinking when building React Native applications and also React.js applications, the way to think about building the UI is by having Lego bricks, where you have small building blocks, you create bigger things with them, and then you use them to create even bigger things. For example, on a very small level, we have a component that can render a button. We can use this component to create a form component. Then we can use the form component to render it on a page that has a title, the form, and some buttons. So all of these things, if we create custom components and if these components are defined properly and reusable, they will make our experience much better developing the application, because we will not have to reinvent the wheel over and over again. We will not have to copy paste code, logic, and styles from screen to screen whenever some things are repeating. We simply put it into a custom component and use it whenever we need that thing. What is something that is repeating on this screen? What do you think? Well, it's obvious that one of these boxes that renders one day in this list is something that repeats over and over again. In our component, in our code, it actually doesn't repeat that much because we are using a flat list, but anyway, it makes the flat list like harder to understand. And if this component will grow in size and complexity, it's going to be harder, for example, to add state or use effects and other logic to this cell, to this item. So for that reason, let's go ahead and extract one of these cells as a separate component. To do that, I'm going to first create a new folder called src, where we will keep all the source code during this project. I'm going to create also a new folder called components, and here we're gonna keep all the components. Inside here, I think I will create a core folder that will contain components for the core application, and later I'm going to have a separate folder for every day to structure and to group them together logically. Now inside this core component, what we will do is we will create a file, and this file usually we name it with the name of a component. For example, in this case, it's going to be day list item.tsx. So, what is a custom component? A custom component technically is a simple JavaScript function. So, it's a function that can be named function or arrow function, day list item. And what makes it a component is the fact that we are returning some JSX that we want to render on the screen. For example, we can return here. What we should actually return here is from app.tsx, this view and text. But actually, let me first start here with a text, day list item. And as we can see, the text that we are using here should be imported at the top of our component from React Native. That's it. That's the minimum of what makes a component. In order to be able to use this component, we will need to import it somewhere in our application. And for that reason, we need to export this function. What I'm going to do is I'm going to export by default, because the rule of thumb is to have one component per file. In some cases, you might have multiple components, and in that case, you're not going to export by default, but you're going to export function. I'm going to keep default, and let's go ahead in app.tsx, import this component and see how we can render it. I'm going to open app.tsx to import it. At the top, we're going to do import day list item from source components core day list item. Okay, we imported it. I'm gonna comment out the FlatList for a second, and let's see how can we, or maybe I shouldn't. Well, yeah, let's see how we can render the day list item component that we imported. Well, we do that very similarly how we used so far built-in components like a view, a flat list, and so on. We open the angle brackets, we call day list item, we either self-close or we add the closing tag, and just like that, we are rendering the day list item. It's very hard to see because it's there at the top. So if I will, I don't know, do it multiple times, we're gonna see day list item, day list item, day list item. That's it. That's how we can render custom components. Let's go ahead and actually render here what we need, because we don't need the text. We need from app.tsx this view from render item of our flat list that has the box and the text inside. The view should be imported from React Native together with the style sheet, because we will have to define the styles for the box and the style for the text. Usually what I like to do is to go back to app.tsx, copy all the styles from here, go back and paste them here, and delete everything else that we don't need. We need the box and the text, so the container, the content column we don't need. We're gonna leave the box and the text here. And we still have this problem with item. I'm gonna explain that in a moment, but for now, let's just say here 1. And just like that, we have a lot of ones on the screen, and they're coming from us rendering day list item over and over again. I'm gonna remove all of them, and I'm gonna uncomment the flat list, because I'm going to use the flat list, and instead of rendering here a view, I'm going to render a custom build component called day list item. So now we should see 24 boxes with this day list item with the same style. In app.tsx, we no longer need the styles for the box and the text, so we can easily remove it. And this helps us keep our components small and simple. For example, app.tsx is responsible for the list itself, but the day list item is responsible for rendering one item. This way we separate the concerns, and if we have to work on specifics about one container, we're gonna come here, we're gonna be able to look at what's important, like only the view and the text. And if we have to work on the whole list, for example, let's say we want to remove the scroll indicator, we're gonna go to app.tsx and work with a flat list without having to see the low-level details of a daylist item. So yeah, that's how we separate things into custom components in order to have a better code base, in order to easier maintain your project and to have everything clean. The problem at this moment is how do we pass data from this flat list? For example, how do we pass the item which represents the day number to the day list item here? For that, we have props. And properties are a way to send data from a parent component to a child component. Simply passing data from the top to the bottom. The parent component in this case is our application, and the child component is the day list item. Sending a property, we already saw that, even if you didn't understand that that's a property. We did that with style, for example, for a view. This is a property, this is the property style of a view. In a flat list, in general, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties sent to this component. Let's also do the same with day list item and send here a property called day, which is going to be, and the value of this day is going to come from the item. So when we render the first one, the day is going to be 1, the second one, the day is going to be 2, and so on, because that's our array of data. All right, that's how we send data, but how do we receive it on that day list item? We receive it simply, we receive it as the first and only parameter of our function, and usually that's called props. If we take the props from there and do a console log props, or maybe even instead of 1 here, if we say props dot, and we need the name of a property. The name of a property is the name that we send here, day. We specified here because, yeah. And just like that, all our items have a different number. And if we look in the console log where we are rendering the props, we see that the props is an object with the keys representing the properties that we send here and the values that we send. So if we're going to send here something else, for example, hello, and the value is going to be world, we're going to see that if I refresh and scroll down, that every component receives this day, for example, 16, and the property hello has the value of world. The names here are very important because that's how we access them inside the component from the properties. Now, to use some some modern JavaScript shortcuts, we can right away destructure values from these properties. Well, the properties is an object, so if we destructure, if we know the name of the fields, we can right away destructure them here. For example, if we need the day, we can destructure it with this syntax by having curly brackets and the name of a field. And now we don't need the props anymore. We will call day right away, like this. And just like that, we have it working. If you're new to TypeScript and you're afraid of that, you can stop here. But if you also want to learn a bit of TypeScript, we see that there is a red squiggly line under the day saying that the day has an implicit type any. That's because we didn't specify what should be the properties of our component. What data do we need to send to this component when we want to use it? To define that, let's create a type. We can actually call it with the same name as our function. And here we need to specify what data do we need. Well, the data that we need is the day, and the day should be a number. So I'm going to say day number. The error is still here because we need to specify what type is this object. So after the object, we do semicolons and we specify that type, day list item that we defined here. Now we see, if we hover over the day, we see that this is a number. When we render it, we see that this is a number. And when we use the component, if we, for example, forgot to send the day here, it will tell us. Well, first of all, it says that hello is not part of the properties, so we don't have to send it. And now it will say that day is missing in that data that we are sending, but it is required inside the day list item. So that means that we forgot to send the day here. It's very useful to make sure that what you expect is what is the data that you will actually receive. And this is especially important when you're working in teams and you're building a component, you expect some data and someone else from your team is using that component. They might not need they might not know all the implementation details, but if you are properly typing your component, people who will use it will understand like what they should send here. And it's also very good for preventing typos. For example, if for some reason I have a typo here, it will let me know and say that the days is not a property. Did you mean day? Yes, I meant day. And just like that, we have learned about properties as well, and also how we can use TypeScript to type our component properties in order to have a more robust application. I will go ahead and actually commit everything. Git. Let me move to. Should I move to a different? I will move to actually git checkout day 1 end, and I will keep adding commits here, and at the end you're gonna have the end results of day 1, and I will keep the same structure for all the days, where I will provide the starting point and the end point. Day 1 end. Let's do git status, git add, git commit, advent calendar list. Lorenzo, hello. Just swinging by for a bit to say hi. Great initiative. Keep it up and happy coding. Thank you very much. We met with Lorenzo previous year at Up.js. He's working at Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken. He's working a lot at the React Native core. So yeah, thank you very much. I would be interested to collaborate with people from the industry. So Lorenzo, if you're interested to join any of our live stream during the whole December, let's exchange some messages and hopefully we can do something together. I am new to this channel. What is the book behind you, React and React Native? That is a book written by one of my friend from IBM StepZen, Roy. A very good book on React Native. You can check it out on Amazon. It has a lot of projects, a lot of interesting stuff. Shout out to Roy. So we are not done yet. Let's take a very short break to see what are you guys doing in the live chat. And then we're going to continue. I still want to add custom fonts. I still want to show you how we can install and set up Expo Router, how we can navigate from a screen to another in order to have the structure ready for the next days. Is it mandatory to use TSX? It's not actually mandatory, so you can still use TS if I'm not mistaken, and it also depends on how you set up and configure your project. It might not have like, where is it? Anyway, like, it's not a rule of thumb to, I mean, it's not like a strict rule to have TSX, but depending on how your project is configured, it might only look for TSX files. And the template that I'm using most probably is configured to work with TSX files for components that are rendering GSX. Well, let me explain shortly all of these extensions that we might see around. Starting with, for example, a GS file. What is a GS file? Is, let's say we have a utils.js that has some functions. I don't know, const function, not const function, const format number equal to something. You might have this kind of files that do not contain anything that should be rendered on the screen. It only contains logic, JavaScript, and so on. In that case, that file is going to be a .js if you're not using TypeScript. For example, here is a value. As soon as you move to TypeScript and you want to type this value with the number type, we will have to move the GS to TS because it's no longer JavaScript, it's TypeScript. Also, your project should be configured with TypeScript, but our is already configured, so everything is working. If it's TypeScript, again, it's code logic without anything to be rendered on the screen. That should be, that is also like TypeScript. Now, there is the GSX. So if we have a component like daylist item that is a JavaScript file, but at the same time this is a component with that renders something on the screen. I cannot find the line because it has the same color. I want to make it larger. Come on. Okay, never mind. This way. Still. Oh, here it is. So while GS is only for JavaScript, GSX is JavaScript file that also contains GSX syntax. The GSX syntax is the syntax that allows us to render components in this way. It's very similar to for example, how HTML tags work. And yeah, whenever we are rendering and we have some kind of GSX components there, we need to have a GSX extension. And if we have TypeScript in our GSX components, in that case, it becomes not GSX, but TSX, and that's it. So Vadim, I want the book. It's available on Amazon. Right, okay. So, are we ready to continue? Expo or CLI, which is best? I explained that at the beginning, but nowadays, whenever I start a new project, I always go with Expo for a lot of reasons, but in general, better development experience and yeah, faster, easier, more integrated tools that we need in any kind of projects. Expo EIS that helps us build and so on. So it's a lot of reasons, but in general, it's a better development experience without any downsides. So why not? All right. One of the tools that, for example, is available in Expo, there are a lot of them. Like Expo is a whole ecosystem composed with a lot of packages, tools that are here to help us. For example, one of them is the Expo fonts package that allows us to work and manage fonts in our application. Besides Expo fonts allows us to load any kind of font that we have as a file. However, besides Expo fonts, there is also the package called Expo Google Fonts. I will search Expo Google Fonts. Where is it? Google. Use a Google font. Yes. Use a Google font. So Expo has first-class support for all fonts listed in Google Fonts. And it's quite easy to integrate and use them. To use one of these, we can check out the documentation of Google Fonts. We're going to do that. And with these packages, you can quickly integrate any font or font variant we want. So to install, first of all, what we have to do is install Expo font and Expo Google font / a specific family that we want. Let's start with the example that they provide, and later I'm going to show you how we can choose a custom font. So let's copy this command. Let's go back to our project. In a separate terminal, let's run npx expo install expo font and expo google fonts /enter. Now, we can integrate it in our project by using the use font hook. You can directly use this hook from the Google Fonts package. So let's copy this import. And we're going to go inside the entry point of our application, which in this case is app.tsx. At the top, I'm going to first import the use fonts hook and the specific enter hook from this library. Let's go ahead and using the use font hook, we can load fonts in our React Native application. So we call use fonts, and here we need to provide an object with an object which is an actual map, where the value is going to be the name of the font, the key is going to be the name of the font, for example, enter, and the value is going to be the actual font that we imported, enter 900 black. Now we can use this enter font, for example, in the daylist item. When we have a text, we can use font family, and we can pass the name that we specified here as the key. So if we already see the font being used here for our numbers. If I refresh, the application might fail because the font family enter is not a system font and has not been loaded yet. What that means is that we first need to wait for the fonts to be loaded and only then to start rendering our application, because it takes a bit of time to load the font, and when rendering something with that font, it should already be loaded. To know if it's loaded or not, the use font hook will give us back some values. It will give us back I think the first one is font loaded, and the second one is error. Now we can have an if statement before we return our flat list. We can have an if statement here, and if the fonts are not yet loaded or there is a font error here, we're going to return null we're going to return null, or we can return an activity indicator. Activity indicator imported from React Native is a simple spinner. So now if I'm going to refresh the application, there will be the spinner for a very, very short amount of time, but after the font is loaded, this will become true. We're gonna skip this if statement and we're gonna render back the FlatList, and in the daylist item, we are using the font family that we loaded here. The name inter is very important. It should be the same as the key, because if here it's inter black, and if I'm gonna refresh, it's not gonna be the same. So make sure how you call them here. Now let's, this was the example. Let's go ahead and maybe later I'm also gonna show you with a splash screen, because yeah, actually let me show you right now with a splash screen, because common use case when we are loading assets in our application, these being fonts, images, large files, videos, and so on, is to keep displaying the splash screen while you are loading this data, and only when all the data is loaded to hide the splash screen and to display your application. We could create like our own version of a loading screen, but it's better to use the splash screen because it will give a better experience to the user. There will be no flashes and ticks. So what we can do is we can tell Expo to not to hide the splash screen automatically, and then to hide it manually only when the fonts are loaded. Let's look how we can do that with Expo splash screen. And first we need to install Expo splash screen. Let's go ahead, copy this command, go here, install Expo splash screen. And usage. We need to import everything from Expo splash screen in our entry point of our application. For example, app.tsx. Let's go ahead and import here the splash screen. Let's call splash screen dot prevent auto hide in order for the splash screen not to hide automatically. I think if I'm gonna refresh, it's supposed to stay on the splash screen forever because we have this prevent auto hide, and this is the splash screen. Sorry, I had a wrong screen here, but we're back. This is the splash screen, and because we have prevent auto hide, it stays there forever. What we want to do is whenever the fonts are loaded is to hide the splash screen. In their documentation, don't really like this one. Let me double check something. Yeah. Yeah, we can actually add like the here instead of activity indicator, if font is loaded and there is no font error, then we can call splash screen dot hide async. It shouldn't be returned, sorry. And now we see that everything is back to normal. Inter. If font loaded, or if there was a font error, if something happened, it either loaded or it gave an error, then we can hide it. Now if I'm gonna refresh, It still says that the font is not a family inter is not a system font. Well, because we need to add like this logic inside a use effect. A use effect allows us to run logic when things are changing. So let's go ahead and import a use effect from React. Import use effect from React. And we're going to add here inside the body of our application. The use effect expects a function as a first argument that will be executed, and as the second argument, it expects an array of dependencies. And here we put things that our function in the use effect depends on, or in other words, when something changes, execute this code. So what is the dependencies? What changes should trigger the use effect? In our case, the variable fonts loaded and fonts error, if they change, that means that we should see if we have to hide the splash screen. So I can add this if statement inside the use effect, and this will be a much better way of handling it. We will call the splash screen hide async only when these values are changed, and only when one of them will be true. So if I change, it's still error. If I don't have this use effect, I expect the application to stay on there. Oh, yeah, I know. Because even though the splash screen is visible, our execution is still trying to render this behind the scenes. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have back the same if statement here that will simply return nothing. Null will stop here if it's not ready yet. And when it's going to be ready, it will call hide async and it will go here and render this one. But still it doesn't work. What? Oh, it should be back to this one. So now everything is working. Our splash screen is being displayed for the moment while we are loading the fonts. And when we finish loading the fonts, we will call the splash screen hide async, and the splash screen will hide, and we will render the rest of our application already with the fonts loaded, having access to it. Okay, so now this is a better way to load. This is documented very well in the Expo documentation of the splash screen, of the fonts, and it's also automatically implemented in another template of Expo that is starting with the tabs. Now I want to show you how we can find custom fonts. For that, we have to go to Google Fonts. Google Fonts, and Expo has access to all of them, but it doesn't load all of them because they are all that would be a lot of data. So we need to install and load only the specific fonts that we need in our application. I can write here some numbers to see how it looks, because we're gonna use it for a lot of numbers. You can scroll down to find a font that you enjoy. I think I was looking for a mastic. Was it? Should be a mastic. Come on. No, it's Amatic. Yes, it's this one. It looks like handwritten, very similar to how like Christmas things are written, so I really like it. It's called Amatic SC. I'm not exactly sure like from where we will take the actual like we need to know the name in the next step when we install the font. I'm not sure exactly where to take the exact name, but we can understand what's happening. Like it's the name of the font, in this case is Amatic SC. So we're gonna go back to our application and we're gonna do npx expo install. It's called, let's look back into the Google Fonts. Expo Google Fonts / and the name of the font. Expo Google Fonts / and we need the name of the font here. So the name of the font that we found is Amatic SC. So let's go ahead and say Amatic-SC. That's what I was referring to. I'm not sure like how it's, if there is a list of all the font names on Expo Google Fonts, but you can understand like how it will be based on the name that you find on actual Google Fonts. So after this is done, Amatic SC, we can go ahead and in app.tsx import something from Expo Amatic SC. And what do we want to import? Let's see what it exports first. It exports regular and bold. So I can copy them here. And the second one is bold. And I will go ahead and load both of them. I will load Amatic as the regular and then Amatic bold as the other one, the bold here. Now in day list item, instead of font family inter, I'm gonna use Amatic here. That will be the numbers, and if I do Amatic bold, that will be a bold numbers here. All right, and just like that, we have custom fonts and our application already looks much better. Let's go ahead and do git add git commit -m custom fonts. And I will also do git push origin day for, maybe not yet, I will think later. All right, we have custom fonts. Our next step for today is going to be Expo Router. We will install, configure it. We will talk a little bit about the fundamentals. And we're going to set up a very basic structure of the screens that will help us along the way till the end of the challenge, till the end of this marathon to build it. Hello, Rogelio. How are you doing? The fundraiser tag is adding new value to your channel. Nice work. Thank you very much. If you're just joining right now, guys, during DEVember, we're going to do a live tutorial every single day with React Native and Expo. We're going to try to build exciting projects. And if you have ideas, make sure to submit them to our idea board and also vote for the best ones. All the links you can find in the description below. And DEVember is not only about learning, not only about the challenges, the marathon. DEVember is actually about giving back as well. Because during this event, we are organizing a fundraiser and we're helping the organization called Save the Children to support their efforts in providing education for every child in this world. So if you support this cause, make sure to donate. Here on YouTube, you can do that through the pop-up. You'll see near all the live streams that we're going to do during December. So all your help really, really helps. Okay, so we are almost 2 hours in. By the way, I will try to keep the live streams around 1 to 2 hours in order for everyone that are watching to be able to actually follow it daily. I'll try to maybe do it even like 1 hour. Try to take like smaller features, but give you the possibility to daily, maybe before the work or after work, to spend 1 hour to build something exciting to improve, to learn something new. So yeah, I'm gonna try to do them a bit shorter than our usual 4-hour live streams. Hopefully it's gonna be possible. You can with Expo pre-build. Sometimes it's required if you use React Native Firebase, for example, as it has native dependencies. But you still keep all Expo benefits. I use this in almost every Expo project. Yes, that's sure. Whenever you need either to write your own custom native code or to use a library that uses native code. In this case, the example was Firebase. Oh, Rogelio, thank you very much for the $50 donation. Oh my God, that's so nice. Thank you very much. And we also have some incentives for all the donors, and 50 is actually one of them. So your name is going to be in every single video. We're going to create a thank you slide, and you're going to be here every video till the end of DEVember. Thank you very much for your support. It really means a lot. What I was saying, what I was telling, yeah, with native code. So yeah, whenever you have native code, for you to better understand, like a couple of years ago, maybe, I don't know, 3 years ago, whenever you had to use native code, in that situation, you got into you had a roadblock. And the only option, if you wanted to continue building that application and needed that native code, was to eject from Expo. And ejecting from Expo meant that Expo will generate the iOS and Android folders and will stop like managing them and will give you the possibility to manage them. In that case, you were able to add native code, but you lost all the benefits of Expo. Nowadays, there is no eject, and there is no need for eject because Expo created config plugins and pre-building. What does pre-building mean? Well, pre-building, at the beginning I talked about Expo Go. Expo Go is a native application that you install on the devices, and it contains the native code of most packages that you might need. For example, Expo Fonts, Expo Google Fonts, and so on that we saw today. Expo Camera, other packages as well. And whenever you install packages in your application like Expo Camera and run your application in Expo Go, it's going to work because that native code is already built in the Expo Go native application. However, Expo Go cannot have all the native packages out there. So whenever you have a custom package that is not part of an Expo Go, and that package requires native code, well, you're going to install it when running in Expo Go. It's going to crash and say that there is no such method or native package. In that case, the next step is pre-building. Pre-building is basically creating your own version of Expo Go that will contain only the dependencies of your project. It will contain dependencies from Expo, and it will also contain dependencies or native code from your custom libraries. When pre-building, Expo generates this iOS and Android folder, but compared to the previous eject, now this iOS and Android, they are safe to be deleted and regenerated as new every time. And actually that's a rule of thumb. Whenever you are pre-building, you have iOS and Android in your folders, but we usually add them to gitignore in order not to submit native code in our repository. Everything that can be generated or installed on a machine based on a file or based on some tools shouldn't be in the GitHub, in your Git repository. And yeah, that goes with the iOS and Android folder. So yeah, that's the whole thing. And pre-building, you can do that locally if you have Xcode and Android if you have them installed on your system, or if you don't, you can pre-build in the cloud using EAS. You submit a job, you pre-build, you create this is called you create a development build, and then you distribute or you send this development build to everyone in your team. They install it on their phone, similar to how they are using Expo Go. It will have a similar feel, but it will be a separate application from Expo Go. And when running your application, it will open specifically in that development build that you created. And that development build will contain your native code and your application will work. So that's hopefully a little bit more clear on how everything works. And just because of that, yeah, like nowadays there is no limitations of using Expo, even when you need native code. And a lot of projects do need it. A lot of projects that I'm using, they have a custom build. I think for beginners, and I can remember this myself whenever I started with Expo, not when I started with Expo, but I want to say that the pre-building stuff was sounding intimidating. I thought that you have to like to get into a lot of native code. I don't know, it sounded complicated, but it's actually not that complicated. It's one command. We might go into that later in this series. If you're interested, make sure to either submit or vote for the topic on our idea board, and I can cover that together. It just takes a little bit of time for the native project to be built. That's usually like 5 to 7 minutes depending on your machine. And after that, that's it. You can continue working as you were working, but instead of using Expo Go, you use your custom development build. Okay, so next step, we are to, as I said, I wanted to keep them 1 to 2 hours. We are 2 hours in, and I still have 3 plans. First of all is to install and configure Expo Router. And actually, let's start with that and see if we have time for the other plans that I have for today. I have everything, committed. Well, we don't need this ABC folder. All right, Expo Router. What's Expo Router? What do we need it for? Well, let me introduce you with what do we need to do next. The next step is going to be whenever I press on one of these days, I want to navigate to the next screen where it will show more details like what we did in that day. And later, maybe even more screens with the actual result, with the actual things that we are building. So this is going to be like, this is the navigation between screens in our application. At this moment, we do not have a lot of screens. We only have one app.tsx file that represents like our main screen of application. Most applications out there need a navigation system, and the default solution that we had so far was React Navigation, which is a great library. If I'm not mistaken, it was also built by the people from Expo. And it allows us to implement different types of navigation. For example, a stack navigator that allows us to move back and forth between screens, a bottom tabs navigator that has tabs on the bottom, a drawer navigation, a model, and other kind of a top navigation, and so on. So this is this was the de facto library that we all used before, and the way it was working is we were configuring. The way it was working is we were creating these navigation files where we configure different screens. For example, Stack Navigator, we specified that there is a home screen that will render this component with these options. So the problem was that whenever our application was growing larger, it was very hard to manage all of these navigators, especially when you have a lot of nested navigators. For example, a navigator inside a navigator. And believe me, even a simple application grows so huge, like in a couple of months, that it's quite hard to manage everything. Now, what Evan Bacon from Expo thought about is why not using a file-based navigation system, which is quite widely used on the web, for example, in Next.js and other web frameworks, or especially when you're building static websites. For example, when building static websites, you simply create files. For example, index.html will be the homepage. Then you have another file about.html in the same folder that will be the /about, and so on. So by simply creating files, you're creating routes in your application. That's a file-based navigation system, and that's what Expo Router is. Expo Router, let me open the documentation, is a file-based router for React Native and web application. This is just the beginning, but it also has a lot of benefits that I'm going to explain a bit later. A little note that I want to make is that Expo Router is actually built on top of React Navigation. That's why I introduced React Navigation first, because if you have experience with React Navigation, some of the stuff like the options, like configuring screens and so on, you will use them in Expo Router as well. And Expo Router is simply something on top of React Navigation, and it automatically creates and configures our screens based on the files and folders that we create in our project. So it's much easier to visualize your screen tree, much easier to handle them. You just create a file and it automatically creates a link with automatic deep links as well. So the easiest way to get started, even in their documentation, is to use the template tabs 14, the tabs template. But we specifically decided not to use that because I want to show you how you can install and set up Expo Router in any kind of application, not necessarily in a new application that you're starting from scratch, because it's quite easy to upgrade from React Navigation to Expo Router as well. So there might be a lot of situations. So yeah, I decided let's go ahead and do that manually. So let's go to the documentation of Expo. For the Expo Router, in the getting started, I'm going to scroll down to the manual installation. Let's go ahead and see what we have to do. First of all, we need an Expo project. We already have that one, so let's go to the second step, and we need to install the dependencies. Let's go ahead and copy this command back to our project. And let's install using npx expo install, and the dependencies are Expo Router, the safe area context, screens, linking, the status bar, gesture handler, everything to enable like the interactions with the screens. Now we need to set up the entry point. The entry point at this moment, if we look in package.json, is the something from expo app.entry. We need to change this to expo router /entry. So in package.json, in the main, change it to expo router /entry. Now, modify the project configuration. We need to add the scheme. The scheme is used for deep linking, and this is added in app.json. I will add it below the slug as scheme. And let's give it a name, for example, DEVember. Again, the scheme is only used for used for deep linking, and maybe I'm gonna show you where we can see the scheme used. Now, if you're developing an application for the web, we should also install the React Native Web and React DOM. Let's actually install it because it's quite easy and it automatically supports web as well. Let's install them. And the next step is to enable Metro web support in the app.json by going to web bundler Metro. Let's go ahead in app.json, scroll down on web, and let's add here a new parameter bundler. Should be Metro. Maybe later it's going to be by default, so double check it with the documentation to see the most up-to-date steps that we have to take. Now we need to add one plugin for Babel, so let's copy these plugins and go in our babel.config, and after presets, let's add a new line with plugins, Expo Router /Babel. Now that's it. I think that's it. All we have to do is to restart the project because at this moment it's let's stop the server. To stop the server, go to it and press Ctrl+C, or I think on Mac it's Option-C. Yeah, I still have like a Windows keyboard, and for me it's Ctrl+C. Anyway, let's go ahead and do npm start again. And usually whenever we change like this kind of huge parts of our application, like the navigation system, we can provide here the -- clear, and this will start the development server, and it will also clear the bundler cache. So this is good, like if something is weird, like something is not happening that you expect to happen, maybe restart the server with cleaning the cache. Now I'm gonna run it again on our iOS. And if everything is okay, we should see a welcome screen. We will not see our application yet, but that's one step ahead. Do we need to install Reanimated for Expo Router? If I'm not mistaken, no, we don't. In the dependencies, we see the dependencies is Expo Router, the safe area context, the screens, and the gesture handler. We do not need Reanimated for Expo Router. Oh, Ignacy is saying Command C. Yeah. But we're gonna install, maybe if we have time today, we're gonna install Reanimated. But we'll see. Maybe not today, it's gonna be too much. But in this series, we're definitely gonna work with Reanimated. Anyway, our application is running, and we see welcome to Expo. And it tells us start by creating a file in the app directory. What is the app directory? Well, as I said before, Expo Router is a file-based navigation system, and by creating files, it automatically creates screens. In order for Expo to understand which files should be screens and which files shouldn't be screens, it dedicated a specific folder called app to the where we will hold all our screens. So inside app directory, every file will be a screen. The app directory can be created either in the root directory of our project, but as I said, I like to keep all the source code in the source, so I'm gonna create it here in the source called app. Now, all the files in app directory, they become screens. So let's go ahead and create the home screen. Usually home screens are called index. So let's create index.tsx, and whenever we will navigate to the slash, it will automatically load this index.tsx. What should be here? Well, I'm gonna let me copy everything from the app.tsx to index.tsx, and we will no longer need app.tsx. That's not needed anymore because all the screens in our application, they will be inside our application directory. Now backing up index.tsx, where we copy pasted the code from the previous screen, we need to adjust a little bit the import files. Let me take a note. Okay, and everything else should be the same. We are exporting default function. Let's not call it app because this is misleading. This is not the whole application. This is only one screen, and this can be home screen. Let's save and let's refresh the application. Still something doesn't work. Not sure why, but let's go ahead and stop the server, start it again. Maybe Expo Router didn't take the newly created app directory. Now if I refresh, will streams be on weekends too? Yes. I hope I will not regret this. But yeah, there will be streams on from now till Christmas, till 24th, I think, inclusive. We're gonna have a stream. And after that, after the stream, I'm gonna go into the plane and go home to my family. Anyway, here we have our application. After restarting it, it actually works. Everything is working perfectly. And yes, let me also open it on web. By pressing on W, it will open in browser. And because we configured it for web, it now opens in a browser window. And here we have it. Actually, let me take it here like this. So as you can see, if we go to our local host, then /, this will be mapped to the app index. If, for example, now we go to the /about, at this moment we do not have an about screen, and we see the unmatched route. However, if I simply create here a new file about.tsx, and with a simple shortcut generate a small component that just says about, if I go back and refresh the page, look at this. It already says about. So what I just did is I simply created a folder called about here. I render what I want to render. And when going to /about in the browser, it automatically opens this page. If I go back to the /, it's going to be the home screen. That means that just like that, just by creating files in our app directory, we are creating screens. Also, folders are also very important. Folders become segments of our URL. For example, if I will create in our application here a folder, user, and then there a file index.tsx with a simple component saying user page, and maybe here another followers.tsx inside the user folder. And here I will say user followers. Now to navigate to the home screen of users, similar to how we have about, to navigate to about, we did /about. To navigate to the user, we're going to do /user. How Expo Router is working is it takes the /user, it looks here, well, user is actually a folder. If it's a folder, it will go there and take the index.tsx file. This is the main file from a folder. If, however, we are saying user /followers, we see user followers. So as you can see, the user becomes a folder, followers is mapped to this file, and this is the screen that is being rendered. So yeah, this is important to understand how path segments are mapped to files and folders. I'm not gonna go more in depth here with dynamic properties and so on, but we're gonna see that throughout these tutorials definitely. I also want to cover later in this series more advanced navigators, maybe like top tab navigator with a scrollable header that we see, like for example on Instagram or on Twitter and stuff like that. Drawer navigator. So if you're interested in that, make sure to submit that idea on our board or vote for some of it. In browser, this is very easy to visualize because everything is a URL. But for mobile, this is something quite new. This is quite new, but if we understand how it works in the browsers with URLs, it's going to be easy for us to understand how to do that in our application as well, on mobile as well. Because now all the screens, they have a URL, they have a route that is represented by the slashes, like by these segments that we specified. How do we link from one screen to another? For example, when pressing on something, how do we go somewhere? So far, we simply manually adjusted the URL at the top, but usually what we want to do is, for example, when we press on this, we want to navigate somewhere. To do that, I'm going to go in the components, daylist item, and the daylist item is one of these components. To navigate between screens, there is the component called link from Expo Router. I'm going to use this link below the date text here to say go to user, something like that. This is just to show you how it works. The link also need an href. If you're coming from web, hrefs are the URLs that we use for our links. Now, all the daylist item components, they have a go to user button. The href that I want to go to is /user. Now, if I'm going to press on this text, I'm going to go to the user page. Well, it's hard at the moment to go back. For that reason, I'm going to refresh. And if I want to go to the user followers, that's what I'm going to say, /user/followers. Don't forget, we created these files and folder in our project. Now, if I'm going to press, I see user followers. This is how a link works. And by default, a link expects some text here inside because it will render a text component behind the scenes. And when we press on that text component, it will execute the navigation itself. Well, in a lot of cases, we want to wrap like bigger components. For example, in this situation, I want to wrap the whole box into this link because whenever I press on this box, I want to navigate to a different page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my view inside a link like this. Link. And I will close this link at the end. We need an href here as well. So let's do href/user so far. And I will delete the link from inside the component with go to user because we want to link from the whole container. Now, if I press on this, it works, but it messed up a little bit our styles. It messed up because between the parent component and the box, there is this link that messes around with our flex styles. To solve this, we can send here to the link a property called asChild. And in this situation, the link will not add anything between these items and will simply use the child for all the on-press events. Now, the styles are fixed, but if I press on this, they're not working anymore. Why? Because when using the asChild, the link will use the child's on-press event to detect presses. Because a view does not have a on-press event, it does not work. In React Native, when we want to handle press events, we can simply switch from a view to a pressable. Let's first import Pressable from React Native. Pressable. And it's easily replaceable with a view, because a Pressable is the same view, but it also allows you to handle press events like clicks, double clicks, and so on. Now the link will send to this Pressable the onPress event, and because the Pressable has this property, if I press now, we are redirected. The styles are working properly, and the linking also works, and we don't have to necessarily press on a text. We can also press on some boxes or some bigger elements. So that's the power of asChild and the Pressable. Well, while we are here, I will delete the user, and let me actually set up the structure for, and also the about, we don't need them. Let's set up the structure for all the days that we're gonna have here. For example, I think we can remove and report and ban someone. I see some questions about Expo Router and React navigation. I'm going to get back to that in a moment. I just want to finish this step by setting up the folder structure for our every single individual day here. In the application, what we're going to have is we're going to have a folder with all the days that we're going to have in our application. And inside that folder, for example, there will be a folder called day 1. And in day 1, let's create the index file. And here, just generate a day details screen. Day details screen. And when we press on, for example, some of these icons, let's navigate there. So from the components, day list item, we don't want to redirect to the /user. We want to the /days/day1. Now, if I press on it, it redirects there. But it also works for day 3. Well, we're going to have separate folders for every single day. For that reason, we need to dynamically redirect to the specific day that we want. Well, because we have a number here, we are displaying 1 on the screen, we can dynamically send the path parameter here. So by saying day plus day. If I press on the 1, it works because we have day 1 screen, but if I press on the 2, it says unmatched route and I can go back. The same for 3. Only when we will create a folder for them, they will be working as expected. This syntax can be improved whenever we have to create strings out of some variables. Instead of plus sign, we can have template strings. To have a template string, all we have to do is use instead of how they are called, quotes. Instead of quotes, we can use backticks, which you can find below escape button. And where we want to insert a variable, we're going to use the next syntax, $sign and open and closing curly bracket. And inside this, we can add any JavaScript variable that we have access to. In this case, we're going to add the day here. So this becomes day 1 when we press on day 1 and day 2 when we press on day 2. And because there is no day 2 here, we cannot go there. Again, while we are still here, I want to show you one more thing. For example, sometimes, let me maybe add a day 2 as well by copying day 1. Copy, paste. Oh, there is too many already. Day 2. And the rest I can delete. So I created that days folder in order to logically group together all the days that we're gonna have, to keep them separate in the same place. But in some situation, we don't want this folder name to be part of a URL. We want to simply skip the days and only have /day1, /day2, /day3, and so on. To do that, we simply put the name of a folder inside open brackets, and this is an optional segment. It adds it as an optional segment in our URL, but at the same time allows us to group things through folders. So now, if I'm gonna have /day, and I think on the web that is more clear, because we can see also the URL. I'm on the home screen. If I press on the day1, that's gonna go to the simply /day1 without /days/day1. It's a much simpler URL. And for day 2, we also have it, but for day 3, we no longer have it. If something is not working after changing this one, make sure to restart the server. Sometimes the cache can impact and say that there is no screen like that. The thing is that this segment is optional, so we can skip it or we can add it, also with the curly brackets here. This might be helpful when we have multiple paths with different optional parameters. And it will still go there. And also, if we manually add /days here, /day1, it will go here, but actually redirect to the right. It will automatically redirect us and will remove an optional path parameter. All right, so that was our day. Yes, perfect. Let me go ahead and do git add, git commit, -m, set up Expo Router and the main screens. But why this doesn't look like native transitions between screens? Vladimir, perfect question. Thank you very much for helping me segue into the next step that I wanted to show you. The weird part is that when we press on this, it simply seems like it replaces the screen without any transition or animation. That's because by default, well, first of all, the animation between how we move from a screen to another, this is the responsibility of a navigator. A stack navigator usually comes from the left, like when we navigate to a new screen, it seems like it comes from the left or from the right, doesn't matter. A bottom tab navigator, it works differently as well, depending on which tab we select and so on. By default, when we don't specify any navigators, Expo Router will use a very primitive navigator, and I think it will simply replace these things. How can we change the navigator? Well, that's where layout routes come into place. Besides screens in a folder, there is a special file that we can define with a very special name, _layout. The name is important. And this _layout defines the layout of all the pages inside this directory. The layout will simply wrap around our pages and it's used to provide common UI elements between screens. What are common UI elements between screens? Well, if we have two screens in a, let's say, one second. Well, if we have 4 screens in a bottom tab navigator, they are different screens, but the actual bottom tab navigator never changes. it's a common or shared UI element that is being rendered no matter on what screen we are. So the bottom tab navigator itself, the visible part on the bottom of the screen, this is part of a layout of a group of screens. In this case, a group of 4 screens. So a layout in a very, very simple form. Let's define it as it's a component as well. So let's export default root layout. Export default function. And if we do not have any layouts, what it's doing is it's rendering the slot from Expo Router. A slot from Expo Router is simply saying render the screen itself. So now it will work similarly. However, if instead of returning the slot, we are going to return a stack that is also imported from Expo Router. Come on, stack. Now that will become a stack navigator. As simple as that. We simply export the stack navigator from our layout, and we already have a stack navigator with a header, with a title, with animation when we navigate between screens, with a back button, with everything that you would expect from a stack navigator. Cool? Cool and easy. When it comes to like we get out of a box everything that we need, but at the same time, sometimes we want to adjust some things, some options, some titles, colors, navigators, and so on. To do that, we follow the same rules, the same options or parameters as we have when we want to adjust to configure React navigation. For example, let's go to the stack, React navigation stack, because we are using a stack navigator here. And let's look at some of the things that we can adjust. For example, in the API definition, we see that we can send screen options to the navigator. So let's send screen options. And what properties does screen options have? For example, it can have title, but screen options are applied to all the screens. So if I do title here, DEVember, that will change the title at the top. Again, screen options are applied to all the screens. So if I go there, it will still be DEVember. So usually for things that we only want to adjust to one screen, we're gonna see a different way to do that. With screen options, usually we send parameters that needs to be shared along every single screen. For example, it can have a, I don't know, background header, background color or something like that. Background, header background red. No? Oh, this one should be a component. Header background style? No. Let's do style, status bar style. Header style. And if we want to change the color of a header, we can do that for here, background color red, and that will change the background color to red, and it will apply to all the screens. So things like this are good for screen options. Things like title, they are specific to a screen. So how can we say that we want the DEVember to be the title only on the index page? There are two ways to do that. One of them is directly from the layout, and for that we need to send the options to the stack screen that represents the index. For that, we need to move from a self-closing tag of stack to an opening and closing tag. So I'm going to remove this one from here, and I'm gonna close the stack below. Inside, we're going to have a stack.screen, and I'm gonna save. And now, using this stack.screen, we can target only one screen. To target it, we need to provide a name. The name should be exactly the name of the file, for example, index. And there, we don't have screen options, we have options, but they are exactly the same. So I can take the title from there to only add it to here. I'm not sure if we need to change anything on the header style, but maybe let's see how it will look if it will have the same. I don't really like. I will keep it how it was with white background. So now the title of our index screen is DEVember, but if I go there, that one keeps the name or the path of that folder in the title. So we saw how we can change the name through the layout, but we can also change the name through the screen as well. So let me show you how we can change the name on the details screen by going to the days, day 1, index, and here if I'm going to import the stack from Expo Router, and if I'm going to render a stack.screen, similar to how we saw before, the benefit is that we no longer need to provide the name here because it knows the name, it knows where, to what screen it needs to apply the options. We simply send the options with that title. For example, day 1. And now the title became day 1. It will be the same for all of them. Oh no, because we changed it only in the day 1. But yeah, this way we can change the options, the titles, and everything related to our navigators from the screen itself. And this is good when we have dynamic properties. For example, if you want to fetch some details about the user and in the title to say the username, that is going to be a dynamic property that you'll have access probably in this screen. So it's going to be easier to just say like title is equal to user.name. Anyway, for now, I think that's good. And we saw how we can do how we can work with layouts. Another thing that you should understand, let me do git commit. What is that? Stack Navigator. Is it going to be recorded? Yes, all these videos are going to stay available on our channel. What I wanted to say is that previously in our app.js, that's where we loaded the fonts, because app.js was the entry point in our application, meaning that any component in our application will be a child of app.js. Now we move app.js to the Expo Router inside the index.tsx, inside our home screen. And the home screen is no longer the entry point of our project. It's no longer, this component is no longer wrapping all the components or all the screens in our application. This is only the home screen. And to show this, I'm going to go into the day 1, for example. And for the text, I'm going to give style here. Font family is going to be the font family, how is it called? Amatic bold. Now if I go to day 1 and maybe let's do font size 100. So if I press on 1, it's working. And you might say that, okay, everything is fine. The fonts are loaded. Perfect. Let's go ahead and try to hard refresh this page, day 1, here. If I hard refresh, the font is not loaded. It was loaded before, only because we first visited the home screen, it loaded it, and when we got here, it was already loaded. But if I hard refresh, it only executes the underscore layout, because the underscore layout wraps everything. It will not execute the index because we directly went to the day one, and in the day one there will be no font family Amatic Bold because we never loaded it. We only went for layout, which has nothing to do with fonts, and then to the day one index. Again, nothing to do with fonts. So to solve this problem, we need to load the fonts in a file that will be executed every time, like that will wrap our whole application. That file in Expo Router is the layout, and specifically the root layout, the layout that sits directly inside the app directory. Later we will be able to add nested layouts as well, but that's for another lesson. The root layout is that file that is executed and wrapped around the whole application. So everything that should be configured and set up globally, like some kind of theme providers or some kind of context providers if you're using some external libraries. Everything that needs to be defined globally on the whole application, that should be in the underscore layout of the application directory, not inside index. Index is only the home screen. That's it. Layout is something that wraps around our whole application. So with that knowledge, let's go ahead and move the logic of loading the fonts from our home screen to the root layout. So I'm going to, from the home screen, I'm going to copy these blocks, everything before return from our home screen component. I'm going to put them inside root layout. Now I'm going to also copy the imports of our fonts and maybe even the use effect, move it to the layout as well. Use effect, okay. We also need the splash screen and the prevent default. So everything related to splash screen, we also import here in the root layout. And that should be it. I'm gonna also clean up a bit. So now our home screen doesn't have to deal with anything related to the application. It only deals with rendering a list of days. And the layout is responsible for loading the fonts and stuff like that, and also for the stack. So now if I refresh and go here, it's working. And let's test that on the web. If I hard refresh this one, it's still, the font is loaded because now we fixed it. We are loading it through layout. Again, the first file that Expo Router will load is going to be app layout. And after that, it will go ahead and load the other layouts until it reaches the screen itself. Because the screen is /day, it will go into the days, it will go into the day, and it will go to the index. Okay, so git add, git commit, -m. This is going to be the load fonts in the root layout. And guys, the last thing that I will do today, we have still, let's do it now. I will show you how we can improve a little bit our imports. Where do we have imports? Well, at this moment we have it in our home screen, where we import the day list item from the components. Later, we're going to have a lot of this kind of imports from our files. These are relative imports, and they work relative to the position of our file here. If we change something, the import will be broken, and we saw that because when we moved it here, we had to update the relative path. In order to avoid like relative paths, what we can do is we can create some kind of shortcuts in TypeScript. This is also something that was added recently to React Native. So let's find Expo TypeScript alias. And I'm going to show you how we can create these shortcuts and later use them to easily import. So instead of having a lot of double dots for relative paths, we will be able to do @ or something like that for them. Use TypeScript. I think it's here. Path aliases. And here, what we need to do is, I think we need to also enable it, but let's try without it. So all we need to do is in the TS config, we need to provide the paths, which is an array of shortcuts, and the base URL. So let's copy this one and put it in the compiler options of the TS config. Compiler options, let's put it here. So if the base path is the current directory, then importing something from @ will map it to something from source. And I think that's exactly what I want. You can also add like additional here, for example, when we import from comp or components, we want to import from source / components / and the thing that you want to import. Now let's try to go in our app index, and instead of importing relatively, let's import it from @components. Might not work initially. I think we will still have to enable something, but let's try to simply restart the server. Unable to resolve. Yeah, because we have to go to our app.json. For SDK, yeah, in the SDK 50, we will probably not need the configure paths, but in the 49, we need in the app.json to add experiments TS config paths. This is something new, and it's behind. So in app.json expo, somewhere after the plugins, we can add experiments TS config paths true, and now we can reload. Source app index. Let's clear again. And if I reload, yes, if I restart the server, it works. And now the import is relative. We don't have that ugly double dots, especially when your project is large, like you're going to have a lot of that. And also it's going to be much easier to move things around, because if we move the location of this file, it's not going to change the relative path because we are not using relative paths. So that will improve and help us a lot throughout these tutorials. So I'm going to do git add, git commit. How is it called? The TS paths. It doesn't look right. The name paths. I think it has an app. How do you write paths? Oh, it's correct, but it looks weird. That means that that's everything for today. So we have a basic structure of our application, and starting from tomorrow, we are going to start building some exciting project, guys. Make sure to submit your ideas. I'm really curious about that. Following the link in the description below, we have all the links that you need. And here on our discussions, you can share You can share ideas. You can vote for other ideas that you might be interested in. I see already a lot of ideas that people submitted. I will look at them after the stream and we'll pick something for tomorrow. Thank you very much, guys, for being here with me till the end. This is just the beginning of DEVember, the month-long marathon of React Native tutorials, where I will go live every single day with exciting project build tutorials, and you have opportunity to follow along and learn something new every single day. It's gonna be every day at 12 p.m. GMT time zone, London time zone, and yeah, if you're interested, make sure to subscribe to the channel, not to miss our future videos. It's going to be a lot of them this month and in future as well. And this month is not only about learning, it's also about giving back, because this month we are organizing a fundraiser that we called Education for Children. And with this fundraiser, we are helping the Save a Kids organization with their efforts in providing education to every child in the world. If this is important for you, if you think education is important out there, then make sure to help us reach our goal, help us donate, and make this world a better place before the Christmas holidays. Thank you very much to Rogelio and everyone else who donated today. I truly appreciate that. And yeah, I will see you tomorrow with a new live stream, a new project. All right, guys. It was an exciting first day, and I'm more excited about tomorrow. Bye-bye.